Texture is one of the most poetic elements in design. Sometimes it's something you see, a visual texture. Sometimes it's something you feel, a tactile texture. But to me, texture is more than that. It's the memory of objects, the trace of things that once lived beside us and now come alive again in my design. In this video, I want to share 5 completely different designs, each born from a different word of inspiration. The first design began with a woven straw vase that sat in a quiet corner of my mother's house for years. Straw weaving, its delicate order, its repeating rhythm has always reminded me of the warmth, simplicity, and calmness of home. So I brought that same texture to the front of the shoe and around the ankle strap, places where the geometry of the weave could breathe and be seen. I started by drawing the structure of the pattern, steady lines, careful grid work, and then added the soft natural straw color with markers to keep the handcrafted feeling alive. I shaped the front of the shoe into a square to harmonize with the geometry of the weave and kept the overall design simple so the eye could rest directly on the texture, on the element that quietly carries these pieces' story. This is the moment when the geometry of woven straw finally comes to life on the shoe. This second design was born from the bricks I had seen in a photograph inside an old architectural book. Calm geometry, precise repetition, a rhythm that only brickwork can create. There was something in the soft step pattern of the bricks, not loud, not decorative, just a quiet geometry that felt deeply architectural. So I brought that same geometry onto the shoe. I started by sketching the brick units manually, the spacing, the repetition, and the subtle shadows that define each block. I chose warm, muted brick tones, not too saturated, so the color would feel aged and architectural, just like the source. And finally, this is the moment the brick geometry comes to life through the Vizcom render. The third design was born from the geometric patterns of the bridge. Those rows of squares and repeating motifs in the tile and brickwork that when you look closely turn into a living texture. I simply rearranged the motifs to fit the scale of the shoes so they could sit across the surface like a continuous woven pattern. To create harmony, I shaped the front and the opening of the shoe with a slightly squared structure, so it would echo the logic of these motifs. And for an extra touch of elegance, I added a single row of the same pattern around the ankle. So when the foot moves, the texture feels alive and visible. And just as the pattern settles softly onto the shoe, Vizcom reveals the moment it turns into something alive. The fourth design was born from a crocheted tablecloth my mother made. A piece filled with beautiful floral motifs and delicate loops, pure white, always glowing quietly in a corner of our home. I wanted to bring all that softness and intricacy onto a deep navy high heel, a place where the texture could stand alone and become the true focus of the design. I began by choosing the central section of the tablecloth, those floral crochet motifs that feel like a breathing centerpiece. I placed them carefully across the upper part of the shoe, a spot where they would be seen the most, and where every step would bring the pattern to life. To execute the texture, I studied each loop and each petal line by line, the tiny twists, the little arches, and then attached the motif as an applique, making sure the crochet stayed raised and tactile, preserving the handmade character that gives it soul. The shoe itself had to be navy, not only for beauty, but to ensure that the white crochet would shine in full contrast, and every detail would remain visible even from afar. And when the shoe is finally worn, the white crochet moves like a piece of memory, soft, bright, and alive. The fifth design is the closest one to my heart. It's inspired by the art of Sermeduzi, an art I learned from my mother years ago, and one that has always felt like a mixture of delicacy, memory, and light. That's why I chose a simple navy ankle boot as the base. A calm, uninterrupted surface so the shimmering texture of the embroidery could appear without any distractions. The central motif is a paisley, botejeqe, placed on the side of the boot, right where, with every step, its curved line moves like a quiet flame. A combination of metallic thread and pearls that hold both contrast and harmony, a soft conversation between textures. Around it, I added a small 5-petal pearl flowers, tiny, bright, and orderly, creating a background that is neither empty nor crowded. This design carries the quiet echo of my mother's hands, and in the Vizcom output, every stitch glows with the warmth it was born from. 5 designs, 5 textures, and 5 memories woven into 4. From woven straw to brickwork geometry, to the patterns of an old bridge, to my mother's crochet, and finally to the shimmering embroidery I learned from her. Each design carries a piece of where I come from. If you enjoyed this world of quiet details and inspirations, you can subscribe for more stories like this.